Man, I'm having so much fun. This is a $1.6 trillion industry. I'm talking about the food and beverage space. If you're not having fun, you're in the wrong place. Yes, it's hard work, but my gosh, the companies, the brands, the flavors, the experiences, the missions, it's fantastic. But some of the brands are different, better, and special. They're the ones who are able to really compete and vie for customer loyalty. Look, I know you want to make your brand different, better, and special. I know you yourself want to be different, better, and special. That's my mission. That's why you're here. Join me on this journey as I interview CEOs and founders from all the different companies within the food and beverage industry so we can discover what they're doing, so we can take that information back, digest it, and become better ourselves, and to help our companies take on different strategies, pick the right technology, pick the right partners, and of course, you got to have great tasting food. You got to have great tasting beverages. Packaged goods. If it doesn't taste good, you're lost. I'm sorry. You're going to lose millions. If you're new here, take the 5-episode challenge. Go back, pick out some brands, some CEOs, some topics. If you love the content, subscribe. You're going to find it on every podcast platform once or twice a week. But I also publish them on LinkedIn, because that's where we kind of hang out. So when you see it on LinkedIn, stop by, make a comment, share it back into your food and beverage network. I would appreciate it. The brands would appreciate it. To all my loyal listeners, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Thanks for coming along on this mission for the past 2 years. If you are considering a strategic job change, message me. Let's have a confidential conversation. If your brand is growing and you need to attract experts, you also need to contact me because I have created a different, better, and special recruiting system. I promise you, no other search firm in America is doing that. Who am I? I'm Tony Moore. I'm an expert food and beverage headhunter, semi-professional podcaster, and I'm here each and every week. Stay tuned for this week's episode. Welcome to Winning at Work, everybody. I'm Tony Moore, and I've got Kevin with me again today. Kevin, how are you, sir? You made your transition up to Athens, Georgia from Miami.
I did, totally day and night, but I actually like it. I'm a big UGA fan as well, so that helps.
Well, how long were you in Miami?
I was there. I left Atlanta in 2017, so right at 5 years.
That is going to be a night and day difference coming from Miami to Athens.
A little bit landlocked here.
Little bit landlocked, a lot less humid, although we do get our fair share of it up here. But what a great time to be on the campus of Athens. I mean, Georgia is the place to be for college football.
Yeah, national champions.
That's right. So no talk of Kansas today, right?
Oh, the basketball champs. Yeah. No.
We'll there it is. Well, so glad you could join us today, Kevin, because we've got another brand to talk to today. We've got Zane Adams from FedUp Foods. He's the are you the CEO, president, founder, Zane? Because I know you've got there's a female ownership involved in this too.
Yeah, for sure. So I serve as the co-CEO, so I get to do all of the external conversations and shareholders and market and all of those kinds of pieces and that get there. And then Janine is the other co-CEO. She operates more. Yeah, she operates more as an internal, and she's very much like making sure that the trains run on time, packages and things get out from the operational side of the business. And then our other business partner, Sarah, who's also co-founder, I like to think of her as the heartbeat of the company. She gets to serve as the chief of happiness, chief of people.
Oh my gosh, chief of happiness. I need one of those around here.
Right? I know. I envy her on that.
I love that. Chief of happiness. Yeah. I'm like the chief of podcasting. I don't know. I could use a little chief of happy. Everyone could use that. Well, we're going to dive into your company and your brand today. And I think Kevin's going to help us kind of lead the brand discussion. And then our main topic today, Zane, is going to be, around building a regenerative supply chain. And that is just a fascinating topic. And I'm really looking forward to getting into that and, the benefits for a company, for manufacturers, for the community. It's a real interesting setup. So yeah, Kevin, why don't you kick us off and kind of get us into FedUp Foods here with Zane?
Yeah, that's Tony. Thanks for the lead in. So Zane, here's the obvious question for me. If I've taken a look at your website, which I really enjoyed because it really is a learning process as you go through it. And I know you've got a story behind the brand, but just the obvious is the name is FedUp Foods. So can you tell me what prompted that and what that means?
That's a great. I love that you led with that because FedUp Foods was kind of a brainchild. We started to really think about us as a group of people who came together about 15 years ago to do functional fermented beverages. And that's a big mouthful, but it's basically looking at all the ancient stuff that all of those folks back in the day used to do that kind of fell out of vogue, if you were, like refrigeration came into play and life started changing. And so we wanted to kind of get back to that like nourishing tradition of finding those foods and beverages that kind of support our body and well-being. And so we started the business and created a small brand called Buchi and, started producing from there. And as the brand grew, we found that, we really and truly created the business to fulfill our mission. So we're very mission forward. And we said, you know what? This food system, sucks. It's super extractive. Everything is so fragile. Food insecurity is like huge. We are in the mountains of Appalachia. So, we're kind of built a little bit differently here where you just can't run down to the store if you're missing like, some pasta or, some bread or some vegetables. It's a pack out kind of situation. I gotta take an envoy and go in, it's a drive.
Yeah, if you've not been up to the North Carolina mountains, he is not joking.
Oh, yeah.
What size farm are you on, Zane?
Well, we own a spot out here that's about 120 acres. We have farming down in the lower part of the property and do a lot of water collection. And all the houses that I own are off the grid, quote unquote, meaning that we're not grid tied. And then Sarah and Janine also own properties within about 10 miles of each other. And we're all kind of nestled here in this area, which is called Madison County, which is the small town. The county seat is called Marshall. And when we started the business, we lived together for about 6 years on a farm called Herb Mountain Farms when we first pushed the brand out. And that was about probably about 5-6 years ago. And, we really believed that, if we are to make a sizable, I guess, difference or chunk in what we do, we have to really, really focus on changing up the way that food is grown and how we get it. And so FedUp Foods came out of that. It was just kind of like, we're fed up both with the extractive food system and what it costs to get good food and the idea that you can't make really good, organic, healthy food affordable and accessible. And we were also fed up in a positive way, meaning our lifestyles really supported really deep nutrient foods, relationships, and connections with each other. So we said, why don't we put it together? And to be honest, because, I champion the marketing front, I really love the FedEx brand. I think it's brilliant from the way they put it together. So I was like, FedEx, FedUp, yeah. Right. And so that's how it happened. And our team always would say, FedUp seems like it's very anarchist. It seems very confrontational, and we're more, want to get along with everyone. And I said, you can't have a diamond without tension, and you can't actually process attention unless you have two counterpoints of interest and perspective. So FedUp kind of came out of that world.
Yeah, and it definitely worked because that was the first thing that I thought of was I got to understand more about this from the guy that came up with it. So,
yeah.
I do appreciate that the explanation about the name. And you mentioned Buchi, and started out as a small brand, but you're more than just Buchi. Well, can you talk about Buchi and then also talk about you're more than just Buchi?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. So, I mentioned earlier a little bit that the small seed or what kind of like where we kind of were gestated in the womb, for lack of a better word is a small brand called Buchi. It's a consumer-facing brand that started in kombucha, which is a fermented tea that offers a lot of benefits in terms of detoxifying acids and digestive enzymes. And we, started that at a small farmer's market and began to grow it really based upon demand. And then as we continued to grow, we looked at the landscape, an enormous amount of competition. A lot of our friends and good friends are kombucha brewers, all the way from GT Kombucha to Health Aid to you name it. We were able to get on and work with a lot of the brands. We started to think about, we don't want to compete with our friends. We want to try to create some kind of scale to the suppliers that we worked with, because let's face it, organic food at the time, and this is about 10 years ago, even though it's more accessible, it's really freaking expensive, right? And so we just started to think, we're like, hey, if we actually really want to make a difference, if we actually want to bring Regenerative supply line into, a competent conversations where our shareholders are not thinking that we're, just giving the business away for charity, we have to create scale. And so FedUp Foods began to emerge. And so we went to retailers and basically said, look, we have the scale to produce this, and you're interested in kombucha, you're interested in functional fermented beverages. We make them, we lead in our industry. Why don't we just make the stuff for you? And then you can begin to work with a manufacturer that actually values where food is grown, how it's grown, how it gets to market. And then, we begin to systematically use the resources of capitalism to shift the conversation from extractive to a regenerative point. And so that's where it really started to blossom about 4 years ago, when we began to work with some of these private retailers. And then it's expanded since, and we work with a couple of select brands in non-competing areas. But for the most part, we are supporting, the big mega stores and outlets where people go every day to buy groceries that can't afford to pay a whole paycheck, to buy things that are good quality food. And the business has continued to have a rapid trajectory and growth from there.
So you've got a couple of revenue streams then, right, Zane? You've got your own private label, you got your Buchi, but then you've developed partnerships with other retailers, and you're a supply chain, you're a supplier for them as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And I think the only way you're going to really make organic food and regenerative kind of topics or regeneratively grown inputs actually accessible is you have to have it so that it's readily available to anybody at prices they can afford. If only, it's like for windows, like if only the very wealthy can afford really incredible windows, you're never going to really deal with having efficient housing. You just aren't. So you've got to be able to provide really good quality at scale. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about capitalism, is that there's this exciting idea that says we can solve the world's most daunting challenges by the power of business that's really thoughtfully crafted and intentionally held.
Sure. And most of the products you grow on site, is that correct? Or do you export as well from other countries?
We are, it's a high up, everyone's got biases, right? So I am biased towards South America. I think they're one of the US's most incredible trade partners. And we have found a lot. And I will say this, there is a very big appetite for organic and regeneratively grown produce in South America, because it's not, the way that food has been held in those countries has been very different than our own. And so it's a lot easier to get them on board because there's already a deep value set around it. So we work a lot with South American countries. We source a good handful of our medicinals, some of them here locally. Our sorghum molasses is still here. We partnered a lot with Gaia Herbs, which is in Brevard here in North Carolina. They're an incredible tincture company. And so we've sourced our echinacea from them. We've had mint sourced locally. And this kind of ties into FedUp Foods. We were working with a lot more local providers and purveyors, but they weren't organic certified. And they were like, look, I'm just trying to grow the food. I don't use pesticides. I grow them at a really high standard, but I can't be bothered with filling out the paperwork and going through so much bureaucracy. And because of that, we had to opt for folks that were organically certified. And then we started thinking, hey, how can we help some of these other farmers be organic, but also regeneratively growing? How can we start? And we said, I just got to start buying their stuff. So we source from a good collection of folks that are here in the U.S., but primarily we use a lot of our produce, like mango purees and things of that sort that are sourced. I think our furthest source right now, believe it or not, is pomegranate. It comes out of Turkey. Yeah. Because where it had been grown, where we'd sourced it before, because of climate crisis, it just won't grow, and so people are looking further afield for it. So that's the things that we probably source the furthest afield, but we try to think about how can the scale happen? What's the impact there? And then what's the footprint coming into our doors?
Zane, kind of walk us through this concept of regenerative supply chain, because it when people get out there and want to research what that means, it looks like you had like the sustainability model, but then regenerative takes it to another level. Maybe kind of walk us through that and kind of explain the why it matters, why why you guys have taken this on.
Well, we really struggle with trying to find farmers who really kind of value, I guess, I don't want to say less work, but value letting nature do what it needs to do with with less kind of invasion into that process. And basically what that means is perennials are a really wonderful thing. Nature has put them in place to do what they do, and they fruit and bloom throughout the year. And it allows us to move away from this kind of monocrop into more of this diverse food forest. So we started to think about, with our beverages in particular, we use a lot of perennials, and we use a lot of crops that are actually assisting us in this kind of climate crisis or this climate fight. So when we think about regenerative as a topic, sometimes it's hard to think about because it really requires a complete circle or a full loop, as it were. And I'll just share this funny story. We were actually sourcing sugar. We thought, man, we're doing a good job. We're sourcing this organic sugar. And we started to get down into the details of how the sugar got to us. And it was actually one of the companies that Monsanto owns. Now, I'm obviously not going to wage a war against Monsanto. That's not, it's way above my pay grade, but I will say this.
And they've got a lot more lawyers than you do.
That's right.
Is that, we're really I've never been historically against genetified modified foods. I just am way more interested in what nature has to say and discovering that first. So we leaned in and said, hey, this stuff is coming from Monsanto. We understand what they do. And one of our employees were like, this is kind of crazy. Can we find a different sugar source? And so we went on this kind of mission to find a sugar source that actually grew things regeneratively. One of those groups, and the one that we're most close to, is called Global Organics, and they're out of South America. They have a phenomenal process of growing whereby the process of their growth allows them to deepen interest and mineral inputs into reforesting the area where it's grown. They are kind of inoculating species that have been taken for granted, I guess is a good way to say it, but have not been an active participant in how to keep vibrancy in an ecosystem, meaning you just go in, you spray something, you harvest the sugar, get out of there, you crazy bugs, I need my sugar. Mm-hmm. Where they kind of encourage populations. They've even bred incredible bacteria microorganisms that help keep the pests down in this really beautiful balance. And they're phenomenally regenerative or grown sugar. What that means is that it regenerates itself. They don't have to continue to overwork the land. They don't have to input deep inputs into the soil because they're growing crops that are supportive of a nutrient density and a nutrient diversity. And that informs the plant and how it grows. It makes it more resilient towards shift in weather. It actually grows with the ecosystem. So when they go and harvest the sugar, they're not taking and creating a weaker system. They're actually taking off the excess that the system is like, here, there's so much here that I'm working with. Use this, and it doesn't impact me as an organism, as a plant. And so that's really what regeneration attempts to do, is it begins to look at this entire ecosystem, and not just plant, but also organisms and human and resources, and figures out this incredible balance that literally, it's almost like cruise control, you guys. It's almost like cruise control, where it continues to grow in this regenerative fashion. Imagine if we could get everyone in that process. The level of impact in regards to climate crisis would be huge.
So Zane, how do you do that? So think about this. If you're, like, I grew up in a farming community, and you basically rotate your crops. So it could be wheat for a couple of years, could go to soybean, could go to corn. So how do you develop a system like that? How does that work? I mean, they've clearly figured it out with sugar in South America, but how could you do that here in the U.S.?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think that I wish I could spend all day farming and gardening. I love it. Unfortunately, I've realized that my talents are more of a gentleman farmer. And I am able to find those people that are much more connected in green thumb. But what I've been able to learn is, if we create almost what we would call a permaculture, and permaculture is basically looking at the landscape as a complete organism and understanding what inputs are needed where. So if you are let's say you're growing strawberries, just as an example, there are parts of the property that would be able to do an enormous amount of strawberry cultivation. And there are other parts of the property that might actually benefit blueberry growth better in those parts due to sun and water and drainage and all of those items. So when you're planning a farm, the idea of having a dynamic ecosystem that allows things to grow, also, by the way, introducing those elements which will detract from pests who may like to eat the little blueberries, or detract from the pests who tend to glob on to the strawberries and cause them to get weaker and create those wonderful bits of what we look like foam, those little moldy bits that grow there when they get too bunched up in an area. Those types of practices are what we would think of as common sense, but it is really an infrastructure system that's built. And I can share one story. It's like when we lived on the 120 acre organic farm in conservation woodland called Herb Mountain Farms. That was about 5 years ago. And we started really doing scalable brewing there. The landowner had this incredible system of growing garlic where garlic really wanted to grow. And as a nitrogen fixer, created this opportunity for bermed products to grow behind it. And directly in front was this huge apple orchard that produced. And then there was a stream that was created from the water that came down. So the water came through silt, which was really nutrient dense, and moved into the garlic areas. The garlic areas shed and it moved into the orchard areas. The water kind of continued through, and the output of the farm was amazing. There's a wonderful Netflix film. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it's Farm, or is it Living on the Farm?
And Biggest Little Farm?
Yes, that's it. You're so
my
good.
Gosh, I love that movie. And
isn't it good?
Oh my God, Kevin, if you've not seen this thing, it is literally the epitome, Zane, of what you're talking about this permaculture, holistic farm where you don't force food to grow in an area where you want it to grow. You literally analyze where everything would best be put. Mm-hmm. And for example, there was one scene where they had these beautiful orchards that all of a sudden were being attacked slowly by snails. Remember that?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then release the ducks. And they came out at night and they munched down and just wiped out all the snails. And it was like, aha. Zane, have you seen the other movie called Pollinators?
Yes. Absolutely.
That one really kind of opened my eyes too to this farming strategy where you plant crops next to your main crop that would attract the pests, so you can do away with the pesticides. And you were just talking about that. Yeah,
there's these incredible what I would call technologies that when you actually map them like you would map a business. And that's why I love The Biggest Little Farm, because they mapped it as a business and they started thinking, how do these systems work together? When we go into the brewery, we're building our plant. So we know where the water goes with the biggest machine and how that machine goes into loading and how that movement affects raw ingredients coming in and what's the flow of people. And we build this ecosystem in our brewery so that it allows itself to basically operate at a level of what we call creating capability or creating capacity and having true capacity. Like if you upgrade and work really well in an area in the brewery, but you don't add in cold storage, you don't have anywhere to store stuff. So you could have all the best machines, you could have really skilled workers, but if you don't have a place to store it, you're going to have an issue, at least in our business. So it's the same way around regenerative supply line. It's like you have to put yourself in the position of creating a whole systems that is integrated in what you grow so that the yield is better. And one thing that I didn't mention before is nutrient density is super important to us in terms of not just how much is like how many apples could you eat, but what's the nutrient density in 3 apples compared to 9. And there are so many studies that nutrient density is directly related to the incredible power and nutrient density of soil. So if we have really good soil and we go really good stuff, imagine what that can do. Okay, this sounds crazy, guys. I know. Roll with me for a minute.
We're here.
But let's just say, for example, our system right now is based on like basically limiting supply, right? So supply and demand. So if you have scarcity, then you can create more prices, more people buy, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And your job here is to get more, you buy more. And to me, that comes from a very scarce mindset. I'm worried I won't have enough. So like the pandemic, I'm going to buy 29 packs of toilet paper.
Right.
But imagine in our food system, if we changed that. What if we grew really nutrient dense food? So instead of having to eat 5 apples, you could eat 1 and it would be equivalent to 5. What if you had, 3 incredible tomatoes instead of buying a whole thing of tomatoes that people put in their salad, it falls to the bottom and they don't eat it and they figure, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Some people compost it, other people just throw it away. What if you actually had 2 or 3 really incredible tomatoes? And now instead of you buy more and that's what, runs the scale up. What if you started charging based on nutrient density? What if it was reverse to where you now begin to encourage less consumption, but better products and services that really deliver value? And this is something that's always happened, I think, in the premium markets. When you buy something that costs a lot of money, you're paying for the level of work and craftsmanship. It's not like your Rolex watch is the size of your arm and that equals like how valuable it is.
Right.
Sometimes the most demure little Rolex watch is the most expensive because of the work and all the things that goes into it.
You know what, Zane, what you described is pretty interesting. Well, first of all, sign me up. I'm all for it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Cause think about this. If you were to go to a doctor and you talk about, all right, what do you need to do for your health and the vitamins? And, they would tell you got to eat 9 fruit, 9 times a day fruit, and you got to have all this intake. Nobody can do it. And
right.
So vitamins a lot of times can be a substitute depending on how you feel about it. But what you described, you could get all the nutrients that you need for a healthy body and a mindset in just a few servings. It's a great idea.
Yeah. And it's like, our farming infrastructure that we have right now is so extractive, and it takes up so much resources, so much land. I know, I think I don't know, whoever was running for president, I can't even remember because I'm apolitical. One of them are running for president. It was this big conversation around cows and methane release and climate. And it's somebody did something, and it was just kind of a big woo-foo, I guess. But the truth is that there is always going to be an offside or and I don't want to say negative, but an extractive side to what we do if we don't really think about the full system. Is cow grazing creating climate change? And that's the reason why we're going to, come on, it's just one input. But in reality, if we actually had grass-fed grazing that was rotational, that also worked with the whole other ecosystem, all of the things that are happening within the life cycle of a cow and the grounds that are on could actually support more regenerative food that's being grown. And so now it's just not, we have a cattle farm and we're doing beef and we're doing X, Y, and Z. We're actually inputs and creating inputs that allow the farmer who's been left out. I mean, I can tell you, it's pretty scary, you guys, in terms of like who's going to be farming for the future. It's big questions that we tackle every day and are talking about. The average age of the farmer is like 60.
Oh, it's a thing. It is definitely a thing. Those small family farms, they're going away. The inputs are getting so high.
Yep.
You've got the consolidation of farms. Yep. I've talked about this before. You need to start thinking about how to become more self-sustaining, honestly.
100%. I totally agree with you. I think self-sustaining for families and growing the food that you eat. And then also, the spaces where farmers are here. I mean, in our neck of the woods, the average salary is tiny. It's tiny. It's like 22,000 or something like that. Something insane. And it's small. And a lot of the folks who were, traditionally growing, we grew a lot of tobacco here. We grew a lot of tomatoes here, have pretty much evaporated. In particular in Asheville, a lot of dairy happened because of Biltmore. Those farms are pretty much gone. So now, in fact, they bring in organic milk from Texas and they co-pack it here. And it's just like, I look at it, I'm thinking, okay, this could make me really depressed and really like, oh my gosh, woe is me. Or I could be like, this is such an opportunity to provide some really good systems to help change up the conversation and create opportunities for wealth, not just money, but well-being and wellness for a great mass of people.
How ironic having to ship organic milk across 7 states. It just doesn't make, that just doesn't make any sense. Well,
it doesn't.
As we start to wrap up here, Zane, I want to understand, more about your brand and how you're positioning yourself to the consumer, how you're helping your white label customers present this to the consumer. And then finally, what's the best way for people to find you, find your website, and to begin to support, your products and the products that your clients are making?
There's a couple of ways for folks to be kind of into and supporting the work that we do. One is if you functional fermented beverages. And so that could be probiotic sodas, that could be kombucha, that could be kefir, water kefir. If you find and love your store where you shop and they offer it, it's a good likelihood that we probably produce it. Support it, just go buy it and enjoy it and get as many friends as you can to drink it. So that's one way. I think the other critical way to kind of think about FedUp Foods is, when we are approached as a business, we created the opportunity to become a benefit corporation. And so what a benefit corporation says is it says we provide a benefit to our community. Each of our stakeholders are very important to us, and it gives us a chance to create policy that just doesn't favor extremely high profits at the detriment of employees or for the planet. So we bring all of those 3 Ps, people, planet, profit, all together at the conference table. And then in the center of our conference table is the mission. And the mission is going here. And we're like, what does this business, how can we fuel this mission? What does it need? And what part of our business can help us do that? And so we kind of think about ourselves in a way where we're not just nurturing our own business, but we really are attempting to be a manufacturer and a global partner that is rooted in its local community, but's really aware that it will take an entire village to raise up a business. And so we are really focused on creating opportunities for our employees and how they kind of connect with us. We don't need a ton. We just need great ones. And so we reinvest in our employees immensely. I'm so excited. We finally rolled out a 401k and we got paternity leave, baby.
Nice.
So we're doing that. And so that's a big part of the business. Like if you want to work in a place that's got meaning and mission, we hope that folks will always take a look at us. So that's a way to support bringing us really great intellectual capital in the form of people and ideas. And then I'd say the third bucket for us is, when we work with our private retailers, we bring them an opportunity to partner with us. And in the design of their program, we craft in what's called our sustainability premium. And it is directly linked to the work that we do in our regenerative farm supply, as well as a deeper sense of what can we do right now, hands on the ground. And so we've partnered with One Tree Planted, which is basically the whole goal of Eric and his team is just to put as many trees in the ground as physically possible.
Wait, what's that called again? One Tree?
Yeah. One Tree Planted.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's really neat. So part of the sustainability premium that we charge to our private retailers, some of it gets allocated to what I would call boots on the ground, shovels in the ground, plants in the ground, One Tree Planted. Some of that premium is reallocated to creating wealth and well-being for our employees. And the third part of that is really using to prop up and support regenerative supply, meaning, prices have increased across the board. I think we have had close to 40% increase across the board, let alone not just freight, just like everything.
Yeah, all the inputs.
All of those coming into us, we still want to make products accessible. We still want to make it affordable. And the private retailer's like, well, that's great. I'm not going to necessarily give up my margin. So it's got to come from somewhere. So we were lucky to have that sustainability premium in place. And that has allowed us to take a lot of that hit. So we're not going back to the private retailer and saying, hey, we have to raise our prices. We've done some incremental pieces here and there really for freight, but for the most part, we've kept our costing steady. So you can still go to the store and pick up an incredible regeneratively made, organically sourced product in the form of a kombucha or probiotic soda or something like that, without having to pay an additional money on top of something that you can't already afford. So that's how that premium is paid. And that's why it's important that companies like us kind of are in the mix in this manufacturing growing kind of supply chain phenomena that we find ourselves in post-pandemic.
What's the best way for them to find you? Is there a website, Zane?
Yes, FedUp Foods .co. I know it's not .com. It was taken. I didn't win that, but it's okay. FedUpFoods.co. Or if you put in, if you go to Uncle Google, he knows everything. You can also put in Drink Buchi. That's Buchi. So drinkbuchi.com. That's our brand, and it will get us. And then you can get linked to FedUp Foods, which is the holding company. You can find us that way. We also have a sister brewery that we are connected to and own partially in South Korea. We launched their private label market around kombucha and function fermented foods. And that business is I'm Alive Kombucha. So that's over there in South Korea, not knowing who and where your folks are.
I work with Koreans.
Yeah, great.
And I have some employees right now that are in South Korea. So there you go.
Perfect.
I'm alive.
Yep.
We'll see if
I'm
they
alive
can find it.
It's there.
Kevin, was there anything you wanted to ask here that you didn't get a chance to?
No. So here's what's interesting about this, Zane. It's you and I had talked very briefly before this, and I checked out your website a little bit in advance. But this has been a learning lesson. You guys are doing some really great work, protecting the environment, employing people, teaching them better practices. I just think it's amazing what you've done, and it's a fascinating company. I appreciate the chance to learn more about it.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it. I mean, one of my biggest thrills is to meet people like yourself and Tony and really just try to hold the bigger conversation. It's like my friend Simon Waring, who just put out this book called Lead with We. It's an amazing book where he really starts to tackle the idea around capitalism, or a friend of mine, Stephen Kotler, who wrote Bold. It's like how to go big, create wealth, and I think it's impact the world. And I guess in closing, I would just encourage those who you work with and people that are nurturing your ecosystem, that we can really do some cool things on this planet. Like, it feels like there's just a lot of nepotism. It feels like there's just war and strife around corners. It feels like there's this intensive divide between people, but 90% of the things that we all can agree on, 90%, and in school 90 was an A. Let me tell you, I would struggle for the A, but I would get the 90%. And then there's maybe 10% of the nuancy, weird stuff that we can argue over. Why don't we just focus on the 90%? Why don't we focus on doing all the things that we can do together? You know,
from your mouth to everyone's ears, man.
Right?
That's the truth.
It's like we just have. I look at our incredible spaceship called Planet Earth, and I'm like, yo, this is really freaking cool. Now, there may be millions of them out there. That's great, but the one I'm on right now is pretty wicked. And I really want to be able to experience all of the richness that it has to offer. And it takes all of us, the business community, thought leaders, NGOs, all of those things thinking along, what's the 90% of the things that we all want? And let's build our engines of industry and our ideas around those kind of simple, basic concepts.
I'm with you, Zane.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us and leading the brand discussion. And Zane, thank you for sharing your passion for food and regenerative and permaculture, and just raising awareness around this desire that yes, we can create a better food supply chain and look for that more nutrient-dense type of option to really help us get out of this monocropping, right? And get into this more, just as you said, this kind of holistic permaculture. I think that's absolutely perfect. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Take care, Kevin.